Commander Kalen watched in horror as the human coughed, gasped, and laughed weakly despite the lethal dose of Xylari neurotoxin burning in his veins. The silver-eyed warrior recoiled, her own fangs aching from the contact with his strangely reactive blood. How was he still breathing? If you want to see more of the impossible things humans do when they should be dead, hit the subscribe button. Now let's see how Julian ended up in the crosshairs of an empire. 10 hours earlier, the Aegis 7 had groaned under the weight of a failing atmospheric seal. Julian Vane didn't have a high-tech toolkit or a team of engineers. He had a roll of thermal weld tape and a multi-purpose plasma torch that usually spent its time fixing the station's broken coffee machines. He adjusted his grip on the torch, the metal handle warm against his calloused palm. Beneath the floorboards, the ship's primary reactor hummed with a sick, erratic rhythm. Julian wiped grease from his forehead. He was a low-level tech, a man whose primary job was making sure the air stayed inside the ship. Yet here he was, the last soul on a vessel the galaxy had forgotten. The Xylari Empire didn't leave witnesses. They were a civilization of cold perfection and rigid order, and the messy, leaking Aegis 7 was an insult to their aesthetics. It turned out that the war hadn't reached the bridge yet, but the silence was worse than the sirens. Julian knelt by a junction box, his breath hitching in the thin air, which meant the readings were wrong. He tapped the glass on the pressure gauge. It flickered. He wasn't just fighting a war, he was fighting the literal collapse of his environment. The Xylari were known for their biological superiority, predators who drained the very life force of their enemies to fuel their conquest. Julian, however, was just a man with a torch and a stubborn refusal to stop patching holes. The torch flickered. He shook it, a small, rhythmic rattle echoing in the corridor. It was a simple tool meant for mundane repairs, but in Julian's hands, it was the only thing standing between him and the vacuum. Is there a limit to how much a person can endure before they simply break? Join us as we explore the resilience of the human spirit. Julian heard the chime of a localized teleport. He didn't look up. He knew the shimmering silver light meant a Xylari commander had arrived to finish the job. Kalen stepped onto the deck, her movements a fluid, deadly ballet of grace. She didn't see a threat. She saw a maintenance worker holding a piece of scrap. Julian stood slowly, his joints popping. He wasn't a soldier, he was a survivor. I'm officially filing a complaint with reality. Julian rasped, his voice cracking from the recycled air. Kalen didn't answer with words. She moved with a speed that defied human optics, closing the distance in a blur of silver. Her hand caught his throat, lifting him off the deck. Julian's boots dangled, kicking uselessly against her armored chest. He felt her fangs graze his neck, a predatory ritual designed to end his life and transfer his energy to her. He didn't scream. He simply gripped his plasma torch, the small, familiar weight of the tool giving him a moment of clarity as the toxin entered his system. Kalen's grip slackened as the human's internal chemistry did something impossible. Instead of the expected surge of pure, harvestable energy, she felt a jagged, chaotic heat that was like trying to swallow a handful of sun-flared copper. Her nervous system, usually a temple of crystalline logic, bucked against the intrusion. Julian slid to the deck, his skin flushed a deep, angry red. But he was still breathing, still grinning that maddening, lopsided grin. "We're terrible at being extinct," he choked out. Kalen stood paralyzed. Her sensors screamed that he was a dead man, but the human was already reaching for his plasma torch. The Xylari fleet was moving into position, their massive silhouettes blotting out the shards of Oros. She should have killed him then. Instead, she watched him crawl toward a secondary power coupling. The Xylari worked through unison. If one mind faltered, the phalanx broke. Julian didn't have a phalanx. He had a ship held together by sheer spite. As the Imperial logic cannons began their synchronization, Julian plunged the tip of his plasma torch into the Aegis 7's auxiliary core. He wasn't trying to fix it anymore. He was trying to confuse it. Pain erupted across Julian's face as the ship's ancient dormant systems recognized the surge of bioelectrical chaos in his blood. The Aegis 7 didn't just power up, it woke up. The metal of the deck plates rippled, and then the ship moved. It wasn't a standard burn. It was a jagged, non-linear jump that skipped the vessel through the crystalline debris of the shards like a stone across a pond. Kalen felt the ship's sudden awareness, a vast, prehistoric intelligence that seemed to be listening to the humans' frantic commands. They weren't flying, they were improvising. They reached the Chronos Reach, a graveyard of forgotten suns, where the great machine awaited. It was a gatekeeper, an entity that judged which species were worthy of the stars and which were mere noise to be silenced. The Xylari fleet arrived seconds later, their weapons locked, their intent absolute. But the machine didn't look at the fleet. It looked at the man bleeding into the deck plates. "We win because we don't quit," Julian whispered, his hands glowing with the same silver light as Kalen's eyes. "And when we fall, we change." He didn't offer a logical proof. He offered the machine the data surge of his own agony and his species' messy history. The result was a tactical anomaly so profound it shattered the Xylari fleet's processing power. Their ships drifted, their crews blinded by a logic they couldn't calculate. Kalen knelt beside him as the light began to fade from his eyes. She felt the heavy silence of the Reach. The predator looked at the prey and saw, for the first time, a mirror. She pressed her palms against his chest. She didn't drain him, she poured. Her own refined energy flowed into his burning nervous system, stabilizing the chaos. It was a gift of order to a soul made of storms. The Aegis 7 settled into a drift, the threat gone, the truce signed in the silence of the machine's approval. Julian's hand fell to his side, still loosely clutching the plasma torch. The tool was scorched and bent, the internal battery drained to a husk. Once it had been a simple instrument for mundane repairs on a dying station. Now it was a testament to the crude, beautiful resilience that had just broken an empire. What would you sacrifice to save a species that doesn't even know it's being watched? We'll be here tomorrow with another tale of the impossible.